Welcome back, everybody, to the Innovation Brief. In today's deep dive, we're going to be looking at something that I think is probably on the mind of every CEO, CIO, and tech leader out there,
Yeah,
which is, how do you build a truly killer business model?
absolutely. And we're not talking about just good business models here, right? We're talking about the ones that make investors drool and competitors like scramble to catch up.
Right, like the ones that just make you go, whoa, how did they even think of that?
Exactly. And the key really is asking the right questions before you even start building anything.
Right.
So today we're going to unpack some of those critical considerations that often get overlooked, even if your idea is, totally brilliant.
Yeah, it's like a stress test for your business model.
Yeah,
If you can survive these questions, you're probably on the right track.
for sure. So let's kick things off with the concept of switching costs.
Okay.
We hear this term a lot, but what does it actually mean in practice?
Well, I think about it like, what are the hurdles that a customer faces when they want to move from your product to a competitor's?
Right. Like think about back in the day with retail banking.
Yeah.
Changing banks was such a hassle. It was paperwork. It was long wait times.
Nightmare.
Yeah, people just stayed put because it's like, oof, is it really worth the effort?
Exactly. They had built in these high switching costs. But then a company like Wise comes along and revolutionizes international money transfers.
Right.
Suddenly, switching is easy, it's user-friendly, it's transparent pricing, and boom, the old model's disrupted.
Yeah, and I think that's such a key lesson for innovators.
Exactly.
About like customer preferences,
Yeah.
ordering habits, even, what cuisines are popular in different neighborhoods.
And that allows them to do things like targeted promotions, personalized recommendations, all this stuff that keeps users engaged and coming back for more.
Right, so it's not just about that one transaction.
Exactly. It's about building a relationship.
Right.
And that's the question every business should be asking. How can you generate ongoing value that goes beyond just that initial sale?
I love that. Okay, so let's talk about another aspect that I think often gets overlooked, which is user interfaces.
Right.
Some are just functional.
Yep.
And then others are like, they kind of lock users in.
Think about like an ATM. It's efficient, but it's ultimately interchangeable.
Right.
But then you have something like Microsoft Excel.
Oh, yeah.
Once you've learned all those intricate formulas and keyboard shortcuts,
You're not going back.
you are in the ecosystem.
Yeah, you're investing.
You've invested the time, you've climbed the learning curve, and switching just becomes so unappealing. So the question is, how can you cultivate that same user investment in your interface?
Right, make it sticky.
Make it sticky, exactly.
Okay, so let's get down to like the core of any business model, which is the problem you're solving.
Right.
Are you offering like a must-have solution to a real pain point, or is it more of a nice-to-have?
It's the difference between a painkiller and a vitamin.
Okay, I like that.
Think about Dropbox.
Yeah.
It was born out of a moment of panic, a lost file, a missed deadline.
Right.
It tapped into this universal fear that we all have of losing our information
Right.
and provided a solution that people were desperate for.
They didn't invent cloud storage, but they made it like user-friendly and essential.
Exactly.
It just made sense.
And that's what separates the good from the truly groundbreaking.
How do you know if you're truly offering that painkiller?
Well, if you're struggling to convince people of the value you're bringing,
Yeah.
it might be time to revisit the core problem you're addressing.
Right. Because even the best ideas need a solid foundation.
For sure. And speaking of foundations, let's talk about something that's often seen as this like silver bullet for growth, network effects.
Right. The idea that the more users you have,
Yeah.
the more valuable your platform becomes.
Facebook, Uber, classic example.
Right. But even network effects have their limitations, right?
Absolutely. Take Uber, for example. Their early success was all about expanding that network of drivers and riders.
Yeah.
But there's a saturation point. You can't just infinitely add drivers to a city.
Right. It's like adding more guests to a party at some point. It's just too crowded.
Exactly. The magic's gone. So it's crucial to understand the limits of network effects within your market.
Right. You can't just assume that what worked in one industry is going to work in another.
Absolutely.
Okay, so here's a question that I think might spark some debate.
Okay.
Are you better off providing a one-time cure for a problem
Okay.
or a solution that addresses like an ongoing need?
This is a fascinating one.
Right.
From a purely financial perspective, it might seem like a one-time cure is ideal.
Right? Solve the problem, collect the revenue, move on.
But then what?
Yeah, you're constantly chasing the next cure.
Exactly. Think about the pharmaceutical industry.
Okay.
A breakthrough hepatitis C drug offered a complete cure.
Right.
But then it created this challenge for the company what happens to their revenue once everyone's cured?
Right. They've solved the problem.
They've solved themselves out of business almost. So that's why we're seeing this shift towards subscription models, recurring revenue streams. It's about creating ongoing value rather than relying on that one-off solution.
Right. It's like teaching someone to fish instead of just giving them a fish.
Exactly. You're building a sustainable relationship.
And that brings us to our next point, the importance of relationships in business.
Right. Some transactions are purely transactional. You buy gas, you fill up your tank, you're on your way.
Right.
But when you're dealing with complex products or services, especially in the B2B world,
Yeah.
relationships are everything.
Like imagine implementing a new enterprise software system. It's a complex process that requires ongoing support, training, customization.
Exactly. You need that strong relationship with the vendor. It's about building trust, understanding their needs, and going beyond just that initial transaction.
Right. So you're moving from like a vendor-client relationship to more of a
To
partnership.
partnership, exactly.
Okay. So this brings us to another critical question. Does your innovation actually matter
Ooh, good one.
to your target audience?
It's so easy to get caught up in the excitement of a new idea.
Right.
But you have to step back and ask yourself, does this actually solve a big enough problem to justify all the effort?
Yeah. Because even good improvements can fall flat if they don't really move the needle.
It's like offering someone a slightly faster route to work when they're perfectly happy with their current commute.
Yeah, it's an improvement,
Hmm.
but is it enough to change their behavior?
Inertia is a powerful force.
It is.
So your innovation needs to be compelling enough to overcome that status quo.
So how do you break through that inertia?
Sometimes the best way is by building a platform. That fosters interaction and creates that sense of community.
Right.
Think about platforms like Bloomberg Terminals.
Yeah.
They provided valuable information to traders.
Yeah.
But the real magic was in the network they created.
Right.
Traders could connect, share insights, collaborate all within this ecosystem.
So it became essential not just for the
And
information.
for the community.
Right.
And that's a powerful lesson. Can you create a platform that encourages that same level of engagement?
Right. So speaking of engagement, let's talk about co-creation.
Okay.
You know, we often celebrate the lone wolf innovator.
The Steve Jobs.
Right, exactly.
It's a lone genius.
But the reality is that most breakthroughs come from collaboration.
Even Steve Jobs had a brilliant team of engineers, designers, marketers to bring his vision to life.
Right. And in today's world, that collective wisdom is more valuable than ever.
It's about tapping into a diverse range of perspectives and expertise.
Right. So how can you involve your users, your partners, even your employees in the innovation process?
Right. Can you create a platform or community where they can contribute ideas, provide feedback,
Right.
and help shape the future of your offerings?
This is the essence of open innovation, right?
Exactly. Embrace that external input to accelerate your innovation efforts.
Because sometimes the best ideas come from the most unexpected places.
For sure, by fostering that culture of co-creation,
Yeah.
you create this fertile ground for innovation to flourish.
It's a virtuous cycle where everyone benefits.
And in a rapidly evolving business landscape, that's a huge advantage.
It's a huge advantage. All right, so let's quickly recap what we've explored so far.
Okay.
We started by unpacking the concept of switching costs and how they can be both a blessing and a curse for businesses.
Right.
We talked about the need to build them in, but also to constantly anticipate those disruptors.
Yeah.
Then we dove into this shift from a transactional mindset to a relational one.
Right. Building those lasting relationships.
We explored user interfaces,
The power of stickiness.
the crucial distinction between solving real problems versus just offering nice-to-haves,
Painkillers versus vitamins.
and the importance of understanding the limits of network effects.
Within your specific market context, always.
We even tackled those tougher questions like whether it's more beneficial to offer a one-time cure or a solution for a continuous need.
Right. Highlighting the rise of those subscription models.
We emphasized the role of relationships.
Especially for those complex products and services.
And we challenged our listeners to ask themselves, does my innovation truly matter?
Does it solve a problem that people actually care about?
And finally, we discussed the power of platforms
Bringing people together, fostering those communities.
and the immense power of co-creation and open innovation.
Harnessing that collective wisdom.
So what does this all mean for you, the innovators, the leaders, the ones shaping the future?
That's a fantastic question, and it's one that we're going to dive even deeper into in the next part of our deep dive.
Stay tuned. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in part one, but I think it's time to bring it all down to earth
Yeah.
and figure out Like, how do we actually apply all of these abstract ideas?
Right. How do these concepts translate into action?
Exactly. So let's say you're leading a company and you're like, okay, we need to revamp our business model.
Yeah.
Where do you even begin?
Well, I think the first step is to honestly assess your current model, like what's working, what's not, where are the vulnerabilities. It's like giving your business model a checkup.
Exactly. A thorough physical exam.
You got to find the underlying conditions before you can like prescribe the right treatment.
I love that analogy. And once you have that clear picture of your situation,
Yeah.
then you can start exploring those different levers you can pull to improve it.
Okay, so let's take switching costs as an example.
Okay.
How do you make it harder for your customers to leave without being like, shady about it?
Right. It's not about trapping customers. It's about creating genuine value.
That makes them want to stay. Think about like loyalty programs.
Okay. Yeah.
Airlines, hotels, they reward customers for repeat business and they create that incentive to stick around.
Right. But it's more than just points and rewards.
Right? Absolutely. It's about building a relationship, understanding their needs, and providing that personalized experience.
Right. So how does data play into all of this?
Data is key because it allows you to tailor your offerings
Yeah.
to their preferences, anticipate their needs even before they know they have them.
Right. So it's about moving from like mass marketing to something much more targeted.
To personalized engagement? Exactly.
Okay. So we've talked about data,
Yeah.
but what about network effects? How do we actually apply that in a way that benefits everyone?
Think about platforms like LinkedIn or Airbnb.
Okay.
They've created these ecosystems where users connect, collaborate, and share resources,
Right.
which makes the platform more valuable for everybody.
So they've really tapped into that power of community.
Right. The more users join, the more opportunities for connection and collaboration.
Right. But it's not enough to just build a platform and expect people to flock to it.
No, you have to nurture that community. You have to create opportunities for interaction.
Right.
Provide value. Make it easy to use.
And I imagine there are downsides to network effects too, right?
Absolutely. As we talked about before, there's that point of diminishing returns.
Right. Too much of a good thing.
Too much growth can actually hurt the experience. So you need to find that sweet spot.
Where it's valuable but not overwhelming.
Exactly. And that takes constant monitoring and a willingness to adapt as your network grows.
Right. So it's this delicate balance between growth and sustainability.
It really is.
Okay. So let's shift gears a bit and talk about solving must-have problems
Okay.
versus just offering those nice-to-haves.
The painkillers versus the vitamins.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how can a leader really ensure they're focusing on the right kind of innovation?
It all starts with understanding your audience. What are their pain points? What keeps them up at night?
Right. You got to get inside their heads.
Exactly. Don't build something just because you think it's cool.
Yeah. The best innovations come from empathy. Right. From a deep understanding of the customer's needs.
So before you invest all this time and money,
Validate the problem.
talk to your customers.
Yeah.
Do your research, make sure there's an actual need.
And once you've done that, then you can think about the best way to solve it.
And that's where the painkiller versus vitamin concept comes in.
Right. Are you addressing a critical need or just offering a nice little bonus?
And while there's nothing wrong with vitamins,
They're not essential.
they're not essential. Painkillers are.
Exactly. They provide that immediate relief, and people are willing to pay for that.
So next time you're evaluating a new idea, ask yourself, is this a painkiller or a vitamin?
If it's a vitamin, you might need to rethink your approach.
Okay, so I want to talk about something that I think is often overlooked when we talk about business models:
What's that?
ethics.
Oh, absolutely.
As technology advances, we have to consider the ethical implications of what we're creating.
Right. We have a responsibility to make sure our innovations are used for good.
That they don't create unintended consequences.
It's about thinking beyond just profit.
It's about the bigger picture.
Right. So, for example, as we gather all this data,
Yeah.
we have to be transparent about how we use it. We have to respect people's privacy.
And be mindful of potential biases in our algorithms.
Right.
And make sure our innovations are accessible to everyone.
So ethical considerations need to be a part of the whole process,
From start to finish.
from ideation to implementation.
We need to build that culture of responsibility.
Yeah. Okay. So let's bring it back to co-creation for a minute.
Okay?
We talked about platforms like LinkedIn and Airbnb.
Right.
How do we apply those principles internally within our own companies?
It starts with fostering that culture of openness and transparency. Encourage people to share their ideas.
Right.
No matter how out there they might seem, create safe spaces for experimentation.
Right. Where people feel comfortable taking risks.
And recognize and reward those who contribute.
It's about empowering everyone to be an innovator.
And don't forget about external input. Customers, partners, even competitors.
The best ideas can come from anywhere.
Exactly. Embrace those diverse perspectives.
So how do we actually put this into practice?
That's a fantastic question, and it's one that we'll be tackling in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we've talked about the what of building those innovative business models, the principles, the paradoxes, the ethical considerations.
The tricky parts.
Yeah, all the tricky parts. But now I think it's time to really get into the how.
Right. The rubber meets the road.
Exactly. How do we actually make this stuff happen within our companies?
And I think it's important to remember that it's not about like these overnight transformations.
Right.
It's about building a culture that embraces innovation at every level.
So it's less of a like rip and replace and more of an evolution.
Exactly, an upgrade.
Upgrade. I like that.
You need a system, a framework that can handle both those big disruptive ideas
Yeah.
and the smaller incremental improvements that come from the team on the ground.
Right. And that's where I think practical tools become so essential.
Oh, for sure.
It can't all be just brainstorming and, sticky notes.
The word scribbles.
Right, exactly.
Mhm.
You need a way to capture those ideas to evaluate them systematically.
And then turn the best ones into reality.
Right, because otherwise even the most brilliant ideas can just get lost.
They get lost in the day-to-day.
And that's where a platform like IdeaScale comes in.
Precisely. IdeaScale provides that infrastructure
Yeah.
for turning your entire workforce into a force of innovators.
So it's not just about like a suggestion box.
No. It's about creating a space where ideas can be shared, discussed, refined, and ultimately turned into tangible solutions.
So if our listeners are out there and they're ready to move beyond just the theory
Yeah.
and start building that more innovative future
I love it.
for their companies.
Well, they can head over to ideascale.com
Yes.
and book a demo for a free trial. They can see firsthand how IdeaScale can empower their teams and unlock that innovation potential that's often hidden within their organizations.
That's right. Turn your work team into innovators with IdeaScale. And don't forget to subscribe to the Innovation Brief and share your thoughts in the comments below. We release new deep dives every Tuesday and Friday, so be sure to check back soon. Until then, keep those innovative ideas flowing.